Among the most puzzling allusions to divine departure in Mesopotamian literature, a distinctive cluster of late Sumerian tablets stands out. Drawn from the tens of thousands of fragments recovered by University of Pennsylvania expeditions, these documents, often referred to by scholars as records of the Great Withdrawal, describe what appear to be the final documented contacts between the Anunnaki and human society, according to Sumerian tradition. Dating roughly to 2000 to 1900 BCE, the most important of these tablets, catalogued as CBS 10673 in the University Museum collection, is written in an archaic form of Sumerian script that differs noticeably from standard administrative records of the period. It opens with the conventional invocation of Enlil, but rapidly shifts to narrate a critical assembly of the Anunnaki Council. The text reports that the divine body concluded their terrestrial assignment had reached its end, and the moment for departure had arrived. What makes this account especially striking is its dry, matter-of-fact style, almost devoid of the poetic embellishments and reverential language that typically characterize Sumerian religious compositions. Archaeological findings at Nippur lend strong support to the narrative preserved on these tablets. Excavations in the temple precinct uncovered evidence of an abrupt end to ritual activity around 1950 BCE, offering tables left standing, ceremonial vessels abandoned in mid-use. No signs of violent destruction or slow decay appear. Instead, religious practices that had continued without interruption for over a millennium simply stopped overnight. Comparable patterns surface at other major Sumerian cult centers, implying a regionally coordinated cessation of temple operations. One of humanity's oldest known creation accounts, the Eridu Genesis, contains enigmatic passages that gain fresh significance when read together with the Nippur withdrawal tablets. Although the surviving copies date to the Old Babylonian period, they clearly derive from far earlier Sumerian material. These lines speak of divine beings who finished their assigned duties and ascended to their celestial domain once Earth no longer required their constant supervision. Notably, the vocabulary in these sections feels closer to bureaucratic or military reporting than to conventional mythological imagery. Recent re-examination of fragments in the British Museum has brought previously overlooked details to light. The text recounts a formal closing ceremony held at Eridu, regarded in Sumerian tradition as the oldest city, during which the Anunnaki carried out final rites before leaving. It describes preparations of the temple precinct, careful placement of sacred items, and performance of concluding ceremonies intended to preserve a link with the divine even in their absence. The level of specificity suggests the account reflects eyewitness events rather than purely symbolic invention. Excavations at Eridu itself, conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities in the 1940s and later by international teams, revealed traces of a major ceremonial occasion around 1900 BCE in the principal temple complex. The innermost sanctuary held elaborate arrangements of votive offerings, precious metals, and ritual implements that had been deliberately positioned and then sealed shut. Unlike typical abandonment or burial contexts, the layout showed intentional organization and concern for long-term preservation of the sacred space. The sudden desertion of temple precincts across Mesopotamia at the close of the Sumerian period remains one of archaeology's enduring enigmas. At the Great Ziggurat complex displays signs of an immediate halt to maintenance and worship around the same era. Inner chambers contained unfinished renovation projects with tools and building materials left precisely where the last workers set them down. Radiocarbon dating of organic remains from these contexts consistently places the abandonment in the early 2nd millennium BCE. Even more dramatic evidence comes from Uruk. The Anu Temple precinct, long associated with Anunnaki veneration, underwent extensive modifications during its final phase of use. Rather than routine repairs or enhancements, the alterations appear to have been systematic preparations for prolonged closure. Drainage channels were blocked, valuable objects carefully stored in sealed rooms, and entrances permanently sealed using methods designed to protect interior spaces for centuries. Similar deliberate preservation, rather than mere abandonment, emerges at Lagash. 1980s excavations exposed chambers sealed with remarkable precision, utilizing advanced knowledge of conservation techniques. The sealants included bitumen, cedar resin, and other protective substances layered to create stable microclimates capable of lasting millennia. Inside lay intact ritual equipment, astronomical tools, and tablets that seemed to be operational handbooks for temple upkeep. Akkadian compositions from the period immediately following the Sumerian collapse preserve older traditions while adding further particulars about the Anunnaki departure. The Atrahasis epic, best known as a flood story, includes sections that mirror the Sumerian withdrawal accounts. These passages portray the Anunnaki as having completed a monumental task on Earth and returned to their lofty abode after ensuring humanity could progress independently. The Accadian version supplies details missing from surviving Sumerian sources. In particular, the creation of a network of human intermediaries trained to maintain contact with the divine realm through precise rituals and celestial observations. This mechanism would permit intermittent communication without the need for continual divine presence. First millennium Babylonian records offer still more elaborate descriptions of the departure, although they display obvious signs of later legendary amplification. The Enuma Elish, primarily a cosmogonic epic, alludes to elder deities withdrawing from active terrestrial involvement after establishing universal order. More tellingly, Neo-Babylonian temple administrative documents refer to ancient procedures for sustaining contact with those who departed, indicating that memory of the Anunnaki withdrawal endured institutionally for well over 1,000 years. The remarkable consistency of these narratives across centuries and cultures argues that they reflect genuine historical traditions, rather than purely mythological constructs. The level of technical detail concerning temple closure protocols, the specific chronology of the withdrawal, and the establishment of ongoing communication channels all point to carefully orchestrated and systematically executed events. Physical remains from numerous excavated sites corroborate the textual evidence with striking precision. Across several locations, archaeologists have recovered objects interpreted as communication apparatus or observational instruments left behind by the departing Anunnaki. Typically discovered within sealed temple chambers, these artifacts exhibit manufacturing techniques and materials markedly different from conventional Mesopotamian craftsmanship. Many incorporate crystalline elements, exact geometric configurations, and metallurgical processes that surpass the documented technological repertoire of the period. The timing of the Anunnaki withdrawal aligns closely with profound transformations in Mesopotamian civilization that have long puzzled historians. The shift from Sumerian to Babylonian predominance involved not only political realignment, but fundamental changes in religious practice, technological trajectories, and social structures. Numerous innovations that defined Sumerian culture ceased to advance, while novel technologies and approaches with different conceptual foundations emerged. Astronomical records from the era reveal another compelling correlation with the withdrawal narratives. Babylonian celestial observations note anomalous sky events between approximately 1950 and 1900 BCE, bright objects moving in non-natural patterns across the heavens. These phenomena, documented with the meticulous precision characteristic of Mesopotamian astronomy, persisted for several months before vanishing entirely. The descriptions correspond closely with references in the departure tablets to brilliant lights that transported the Anunnaki to their celestial home. The astronomical observations documented during the final months of the Anunnaki presence on Earth offer vital context for understanding the internal discussions that led to their departure. Archival records from Babylonian temples, though copied in the Neo-Babylonian period, clearly draw from far older material. These fragmentary texts, written in a blend of Sumerian and early Akkadian, preserve accounts of the last council meetings held at Nippur's Echo complex. One of the best preserved examples appears on tablet VAT 9555, now in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. This document, part of a longer series, recounts a session chaired by Enlil during which sharp divisions emerged among Anunnaki leaders. Enki, long linked with wisdom and concern for humankind, argued passionately for continued direct supervision of human progress. He expressed deep worry that humanity had not yet matured enough for full autonomy, and that an early withdrawal might trigger civilizational collapse. Enlil, however, pressed for immediate departure, pointing to the fulfillment of predetermined cycles. The tablet records his position with unusual specificity, citing astronomical computations and fixed timelines set at the very beginning of the Anunnaki mission. According to these sources, the original plan had always included a defined endpoint for active divine involvement, time to coincide with humanity reaching certain developmental thresholds. The discussion went beyond these core positions. Other council members raised practical issues concerning resource expenditure and the long-term viability of maintaining an earthly operation. Fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection describe Ninlil presenting meticulous accounting ledgers that detailed the massive energy and material costs required to sustain their presence. Written in the characteristically dry, bureaucratic style of Sumerian administration, these records reveal that Anunnaki activities on Earth depended on constant resupply from their original domain. Contemporary temple archives from major centers such as Girsu show sharp increases in tribute demands and labor quotas during the last decades of direct Anunnaki oversight. Texts list extraordinary requirements for exotic materials, particular grades of gold, silver, and rare gemstones, processed in temple workshops before being sent to unspecified destinations outside normal trade networks. The volumes far exceeded routine temple needs, suggesting preparation for off-world transport. Economic pressures formed a central factor in the withdrawal decision, according to multiple tablet traditions. The Drahem archive, unearthed at Pusrish Dagon, contains livestock tallies documenting enormous surges in deliveries of cattle, sheep, and goats to temple facilities just before the departure. Rather than serving standard sacrificial purposes, these animals passed through specialized processing units that extracted targeted biological substances. The tablets outline intricate procedures involving treatment with rare minerals and timed exposure to specific celestial alignments. Perhaps the clearest economic clue comes from Silver Tablet CBS 16042, which logs transactions involving a substance called sky metal. Described as more precious than gold and possessing unique qualities, this material was gathered from meteorite falls across Mesopotamia and refined in temple workshops under direct Anunnaki direction. The record states that large quantities of the processed sky metal were allocated for what the text terms great vessels of return, strongly implying preparation or upkeep of departure craft. External corroboration appears in old Assyrian merchant tablets from Kanesh. These documents record Mesopotamian traders urgently seeking rare minerals, specially colored and clarified gemstones, and metals that demanded advanced smelting, all destined exclusively for temple use at extraordinarily high prices. Scattered references to the Tablet of Destinies throughout Sumerian literature acquire new meaning in the context of the departure debate. Careful study reveals they contain precise chronological data, anchored to astronomical cycles, rather than vague mythological symbolism. Tablet K, 3454, in the British Museum collection, describes the Tablet of Destinies as recording appointed times for all major undertakings, and states that the Anunnaki withdrawal was scheduled according to calculations made at the outset of their mission. Temple records from Uruk preserve centuries of mathematically rigorous planetary and stellar observations, showing that Anunnaki operations were synchronized with particular celestial events. The chosen departure window coincided with a rare multiplanetary alignment recurring roughly every 3,600 years, suggesting the Anunnaki operated on cosmic timescales far beyond ordinary human planning. The Sumerian king list, usually read as royal propaganda, includes cryptic notations about divine reigns that ended not by death or overthrow, but by completion of appointed service. When these unusually long reigns are cross-checked against real astronomical data, they display a level of long-range planning spanning millennia. Flood narratives preserved in Sumerian tradition shed important light on Anunnaki deliberations concerning humanity's readiness for independence. The Eridu Genesis presents a nuanced divine council debate over human capacity for self-rule, far more complex than the later good versus evil framing found in many flood stories. Enki highlights human accomplishments in agriculture, metalworking, and social organization, while others voice concerns about violence and ecological damage. Tablet CBS 10673 itself indicates that the deluge was not punitive, but a controlled stress test of human resilience and adaptability, a calibrated challenge to determine whether civilization could rebuild without direct divine support. The survival of selected humans and animals functioned as a deliberate experiment in independence. The successful post-flood recovery supplied critical evidence supporting the withdrawal decision. Archaeological flood strata at sites such as Uruk exhibit unusual features consistent with managed water release rather than purely natural inundation. Debris patterns suggesting prior evacuation of valuables, followed by swift reconstruction with retained access to advanced resources and expertise. Patterns incompatible with total catastrophe. Post-deluge Sumerian accounts also describe protocols established between the Anunnaki and survivors for future interaction. Fragments from Nippur detail the selection and training of human intermediaries who would maintain contact through ritual and astronomical means. Designated sacred locations and ritual calendars were created to ensure correct timing for these exchanges. Internal disagreements among Anunnaki leadership extended beyond timing to fundamental questions about their relationship with humanity. Tablet VIA-T 17019 records a faction led by Marduk advocating gradual disengagement that would permit re-intervention if civilization faced existential threats. This stance clashed with Enlil's insistence on complete separation, arguing that ongoing involvement would hinder genuine autonomy. Council records preserve detailed evaluations of human population trends, agricultural output, metallurgical progress, and societal complexity, all measured against pre-established benchmarks for independence. Results were mixed. Humanity exceeded expectations in some domains, irrigation, written law, independent astronomical observation, while lagging in others, warfare, environmental harm, inequality. This ambivalence generated genuine uncertainty about the optimal moment for withdrawal. Economic sustainability arguments intensified the debate. Temple documents report mounting difficulties maintaining the technological infrastructure supporting Anunnaki operations. Equipment breakdowns, supply interruptions, personnel shortages. These practical strains lent urgency to the philosophical and strategic discussions. Administrative texts from the final phase describe accelerated training initiatives for human temple staff who would assume responsibility for sacred sites post-departure. The curriculum covered not only ritual, but also technical upkeep of facilities and equipment left behind, indicating systematic knowledge transfer so humanity could continue advancing. The decision-making process reached its climax in what Tablet CBS 11987 calls the final weighing, a comprehensive review of economic, chronological, developmental, and political factors. The text states that the outcome was ultimately unanimous, achieved only after prolonged negotiation among factions. Royal archives from the Kassite period mention court advisors known as Apkallu, sages, who claimed ongoing contact with ancient divine sources via specialized ritual procedures. These figures offered remarkably effective counsel on statecraft, military planning, and economic policy, advice that frequently proved superior to information gathered through conventional intelligence channels. The Apkallu tradition itself preserved detailed descriptions of their communication methods, which align closely with the protocols outlined in the Guardian assignment tablets. Elaborate preparatory rites, astronomically timed sessions, and the use of symbolic objects and arrangements to establish contact. The precision demanded by these procedures, together with the consistently advanced nature of the knowledge accessed, makes it difficult to dismiss them as mere psychological or cultural artifacts. Archaeological remains at sites linked to the Apkallu tradition, most notably chambers beneath the royal palace at Murray, contain equipment consistent with the described practices. Instruments for celestial observation, facilities for preparing ritual substances, and setups requiring exact environmental control and timing. These subterranean spaces remained in active use for centuries after the main palace fell into disuse, suggesting the tradition operated independently of ordinary political structures. As direct guardian-human interaction gradually faded, the need arose for permanent, secure depositories capable of safeguarding essential knowledge across future generations. Late Neo-Sumerian administrative texts describe systematic creation of what tablet CBS 21,847 calls houses of sealed wisdom beneath principal temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. These were far more than simple storerooms. They constituted engineered long-term preservation environments designed to protect both cuneiform tablets and physical artifacts through millennia of potential neglect, flooding, or deliberate destruction. The most detailed building account survives in Nippur Temple records, particularly tablet N456, which chronicles the excavation of deep chambers under the Eker during Ur-Nammu's reign. It provides exact measurements. Chambers sunk 42 cubits beneath the temple foundations, with internal dimensions sufficient to hold thousands of tablets plus larger objects. Construction employed techniques exceeding standard Mesopotamian masonry. Fired brick faced with bitumen and rare mineral sealants forming impermeable barriers against groundwater for centuries. Excavations at Nippur, notably by the Oriental Institute of Chicago in 1956, located the upper portions of an extensive subsurface network whose full extent remains partly unexplored due to high modern water tables and structural risks to the overlying ruins. The exposed rooms feature sophisticated passive ventilation, maintaining airflow without external openings, walls coated with preservative mixtures of cedar oil, frankincense resin, and metallic salts creating antimicrobial microenvironments, raised floors with integrated drainage to channel moisture away from stored contents, and thermal buffering air shafts that stabilize internal temperature despite external seasonal swings. A parallel but even deeper archive complex at Eridu is described in tablet VI-AT 18934. Designed specifically to house foundation knowledge, core principles of mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy. It included not only texts, but three-dimensional models, working mechanical devices, and preserved biological specimens that illustrated fundamental concepts more effectively than writing alone. Iraqi excavations at Eridu, 1946 to 1949, uncovered sections of this underground installation. Stone platforms with precision-cut channels and mounting points once supported bronze and stone mechanical models, demonstrating planetary orbits, geometric theorems, and basic engineering principles, with accuracy far beyond the period's conventionally attributed knowledge. One sealed chamber yielded artifact E1247, Iraq Museum, an interlocking bronze disc astronomical calculator capable of computing planetary positions, eclipse predictions, and calendar conversions at a level comparable to early modern software. Metallurgical and construction analysis indicates fabrication techniques inconsistent with known Mesopotamian metalworking. The Uruk archive complex, detailed in administrative tablet W20570, concentrated on medical and biological preservation. Its chambers for the living essence maintained tightly controlled environments for storing viable plant and animal specimens, medicinal preparations, and precision surgical instruments. Residual traces in sealed crystalline and alloy containers show complex biochemical compounds, while preserved plant tissues retain cellular integrity after thousands of years, evidence of stabilization methods undocumented in surviving ancient medical literature. Surgical tools recovered from these chambers display microscopic edge sharpness, corrosion-resistant alloys unknown to the period, and designs implying procedures not reinvented until the modern era. Babylon's central archive, according to tablet B, M45789, served as the primary repository for mathematical and astronomical computation. Its calculating chambers housed large-scale mechanical solar system models, geared calculators for celestial event prediction, and reference tables of unprecedented precision. Early 20th century excavations exposed portions of these rooms, revealing bronze and gemstone devices incorporating gear ratios and mechanical principles that anticipate Renaissance clockwork astronomy, including provisions for tracking equinoctial precession, planetary conjunctions, and eclipse cycles. Preserving such sophisticated artifacts over millennia required more than passive storage. It demanded autonomous environmental control systems. Tablet CBS 15623 describes self-sustaining mechanisms within the archive complexes, mechanical water circulation loops, passive air filtration, thermoregulation chambers, and timed chemical dispensers that renewed preservative atmospheres without human intervention. At several sites, notably Girsu, archaeologists found devices still partially functional after more than 3,000 years, including anti-stagnation water systems, contaminant trapping filters, and periodic release preservative reservoirs. Human oversight of these archives evolved from direct Anunnaki supervision to hereditary priesthoods trained to operate and maintain the facilities independently. Tablet K 9876 outlines the curriculum for Babylonian archive priests: advanced mathematics, astronomy, linguistics, chemistry, and mechanical engineering. Subjects far beyond ordinary temple school education. Initiates learn to calibrate instruments, repair mechanical calculators, service preservation systems, and decipher symbolically encrypted records. Access control combined physical barriers, encoded symbolic puzzles, and ritual authentication procedures. Sensitive content was protected through layered encryption, mathematical tables hidden via substitution ciphers, astronomical data embedded steganographically in religious hymns, technical instructions disguised as liturgical rubrics. Periodic, controlled knowledge releases to qualified human scholars occurred at developmentally appropriate moments, copying selected texts, demonstrating techniques under supervision, granting limited device access. Timing aligned with human readiness so that advanced concepts could be absorbed and applied rather than misunderstood or lost. These archive complexes also functioned as discrete research centers. Subterranean laboratories at multiple sites contained equipment for chemical synthesis, metallurgical experimentation, and biological study. Innovations produced there were gradually introduced into wider civilization through mystery schools and priestly networks. The interconnected archive network relied on messenger services, signal systems, and occasional conferences to coordinate preservation policies, material transfers, and expertise sharing across Mesopotamia. Advanced knowledge entered mainstream culture through disguised channels. Mathematics reframed as commercial accounting tools. Astronomy integrated into agricultural calendars. Medicine disseminated via temple healing cults. This gradual diffusion ensured the information appeared organic to human development rather than externally imposed. Later, Mesopotamian sources repeatedly allude to hidden repositories of ancient wisdom beneath temple foundations. Neo-Babylonian royal inscriptions record attempts to rediscover and enter these archives, suggesting later rulers retained institutional memory of their existence and importance even when the technical means of access had been forgotten. The establishment of these underground repositories formed only one pillar of the Anunnaki withdrawal strategy. An equally intricate component involved the deliberate cultivation and management of specific human bloodlines intended to serve as long-term hereditary custodians of divine knowledge and institutional continuity. The Sumerian king list, frequently dismissed as mere royal legitimizing propaganda, reveals, upon closer inspection, evidence of a sophisticated program of genetic and cultural selection. Tablet CBS 13294 from the University of Pennsylvania collection provides the most explicit surviving description of what it calls bloodline selection protocols, implemented during the closing decades of direct Anunnaki administration. The document outlines systematic screening of human populations to identify carriers of genetic markers indicating biological compatibility with Anunnaki heritage. Evaluations combined detailed physical assessments, cognitive testing, and multi-generational genealogical mapping to determine optimal breeding pairings that would preserve and concentrate desired characteristics. Selection criteria extended well beyond genetics to encompass psychological profiling and cultural alignment, ensuring chosen lineages could reliably uphold Anunnaki traditions and knowledge systems across political upheavals. Candidates underwent rigorous evaluation of symbolic reasoning, mathematical aptitude, observational astronomy skills, and ritual competence. Successful individuals also displayed consistent traits of discretion, loyalty, and resilience to external coercion, qualities essential for safeguarding restricted information over centuries. Archaeological traces at Ur support these textual accounts. Excavations in the 1920s within the Royal Palace precinct uncovered specialized chambers apparently designed for such testing protocols. These rooms contained precision measuring instruments, astronomical devices, and mechanical apparatus for assessing coordination, reaction speed, and cognitive processing, features consistent with structured human evaluation. The Royal Cemetery at Ur further corroborates the program through distinct burial patterns among individuals of presumed divine descent. Tombs reserved for those carrying Anunnaki heritage employed advanced preservation methods, crystalline containers for biological samples, and metallic objects suggestive of post-mortem communication apparatus, practices markedly different from standard elite interments. Queen Puabi's tomb stands as a particularly vivid example. Beyond conventional grave goods, it included astronomical calculators, chemical vessels for tissue preservation, and signaling devices. Analysis of her remains has identified cranial proportions, bone density profiles, and dental morphology that deviate from baseline contemporary human populations in ways consistent with documented hybridization patterns in Sumerian creation accounts. The extraordinarily prolonged reigns listed for early rulers in the Sumerian king list may reflect genuine biological advantages, enhanced longevity conferred by Anunnaki genetic contributions, rather than purely mythological exaggeration. Administrative records from Uruk detail exclusive life extension therapies and biochemical interventions available only to royal houses, procedures involving sophisticated interventions absent from ordinary medical practice. Tablet V. A. T. 16,742 records, the institution of strict royal marriage regulations aimed at maintaining and intensifying Anunnaki genetic heritage within governing dynasties. These protocols mandated genealogical compatibility verification, bloodline purity confirmation, and planned reproduction to optimize trait transmission. Ceremonial aspects of these unions incorporated biological rituals intended to enhance fertility and genetic success. The system extended beyond immediate royalty to include managed breeding programs among secondary noble houses functioning as genetic reserve pools. Detailed record-keeping tracked lineage traits, arranged genetically strategic marriages, and monitored offspring for advancement potential within the hierarchy. Such programs persisted for centuries after the Anunnaki departure, administered by hereditary priesthoods that retained the requisite technical and genealogical expertise. Genealogical precision in administrative archives from Mari demonstrates multi-generational tracking of physical, intellectual, and temperamental characteristics within monitored bloodlines, patterns indicative of deliberate management rather than random demographic development. Hereditary priestly families constituted another vital element of the preservation strategy. Tablet K7845 describes the selection and specialized training of lineages chosen for genetic affinity with Anunnaki heritage and proven capacity to transmit complex knowledge systems intact across generations. These priestly bloodlines enjoyed privileged access to advanced education, technical instruction, and esoteric ritual knowledge, positioning them as enduring intermediaries between departed Anunnaki and evolving human civilization. Educational regimens for children born into these families commenced in early childhood and continued lifelong, combining extensive oral memorization, mastery of symbolic codes, and hands-on training in technological procedures. Processes that required both cultural immersion and apparent genetic predisposition for full efficacy. Excavations at Babylon have exposed residential and educational compounds, observatories, chemical laboratories, and discrete communication facilities that supported these priestly lineages for centuries. The architectural quality and embedded technology of these structures significantly surpass typical temple construction, underscoring their strategic importance. The Enuma Anu Enlil series, a vast compendium of astronomical omens and observations, documents the ongoing scholarly output of these hereditary priesthoods. Its progressive refinement of predictive mathematics and observational accuracy over centuries demonstrates sustained access to advanced computational tools and observational methods long after direct Anunnaki presence ended. Royal mortuary practices evolved in the post-departure era to facilitate continued interaction with deceased rulers believed to carry Anunnaki lineage. Tablet B, M, 67,432 details. Mummification techniques designed not only to preserve physical remains, but to prepare them for spiritual communication via specialized ritual methods. Chemical neural tissue stabilization, crystalline energy conductors, and positioning of signaling devices enabling dialogue between living descendants and ancestral figures. Recent excavations near Uruk identified a tomb attributed to Gilgamesh that exemplifies these practices. The burial chamber incorporated autonomous chemical preservation systems, operational communication apparatus, and precise astronomical alignments linking the interment to specific celestial events. Genetic analysis of the remains confirmed markers consistent with Anunnaki heritage, alongside evidence of life extension interventions that markedly extended natural human lifespan. Dynastic succession protocols incorporated genetic verification to ensure continuity of Anunnaki descent within ruling houses. Babylonian administrative records describe requirements for demonstrating specific biological markers, hereditary aptitudes, and successful completion of knowledge examinations accessible only to those carrying appropriate genetic predispositions. Mystery schools attached to royal bloodlines created secure institutional frameworks for knowledge transmission while restricting access to qualified individuals. Operating within palace precincts and major cult centers, these schools delivered curricula in advanced mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, medicine, and engineering. Subjects requiring both intellectual training and apparent genetic aptitude for mastery. Tablet CBS 18,765 details. Marriage alliance networks linking royal houses across Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Egypt, and the Indus region. These alliances balanced genetic diversity with bloodline integrity through diplomatic protocols that included compatibility testing, knowledge-sharing agreements, and mutual security arrangements. Archaeological correlates appear in the sudden emergence of shared architectural motifs, technological artifacts, and cultural practices across geographically distant regions. Standardized design elements facilitating coordination among allied lineages. Distinct physiological and cognitive characteristics associated with concentrated Anunnaki heritage are described in Neo-Babylonian medical texts, which outline diagnostic protocols for identifying carriers through cranial metrics, skeletal proportions, sensory acuity, and intellectual performance. These procedures served both bloodline authentication and strategic marriage planning. Administrative records from Persepolis indicate that bloodline identification continued into the Persian period, with references to keepers of ancient blood consulted on succession, marriage, and governance matters. Persian royal inscriptions mention verification rituals, knowledge assessments, and ceremonial communications preserving connection to the original Mesopotamian legacy. The gradual diffusion of Anunnaki-descended bloodlines across the ancient world created far-flung networks of genetically related ruling elites capable of maintaining contact and cooperation over vast distances and long periods. These networks facilitated the transmission of architectural styles, mathematical systems, and astronomical knowledge that appear with remarkable consistency across disparate civilizations. Roman imperial archives preserve accounts of Eastern advisors claiming descent from ancient Mesopotamian royal houses. These individuals supplied calendar reforms, engineering solutions, and administrative methods incorporating principles far in advance of standard Roman practice, suggesting successful long-term maintenance of both genetic and cultural heritage. The institutional structures supporting bloodline preservation proved remarkably adaptive, evolving under changing political and religious regimes while preserving core functions. Concealment strategies allowed these programs to survive the fall of individual states and operate under new cultural frameworks. Medieval Islamic sources refer to scholarly families in Mesopotamia and neighboring regions who maintained pre-Islamic knowledge traditions and claimed descent from ancient royal lines. These families advised caliphs and contributed foundational advances to Islamic astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, their contributions reflecting preserved lineages capable of transmitting sophisticated information across major civilizational transitions. The preservation of Anunnaki bloodlines through carefully orchestrated human dynasties represented only the terrestrial dimension of their long-term strategy. Equally elaborate were the astronomical preparations that mapped precise celestial navigation corridors for the return voyage to their original cosmic domain. Sumerian astronomical compilations from the closing phase of direct Anunnaki presence display an unprecedented level of stellar cartography and orbital mechanics that far surpasses the observational and computational abilities usually credited to ancient Mesopotamian skywatchers. The MUL.APIN compendium, conventionally dated to around 1000 BCE, but demonstrably based on much earlier observations, embeds the clearest surviving record of these departure pathways within its star catalogues and planetary schemes. Tablet K, 6174, British Museum, preserves the most complete version of this navigational manual. It partitions the visible sky into three primary ways, or pathways: the way of Anu, the way of Enlil, and the way of Ea. Modern astronomical reanalysis reveals that these divisions are not arbitrary mythological categories, but correspond to accurately calculated three-dimensional trajectories, extending well beyond the inner solar system. The way of Anu traces 18 constellations along what the text calls the upper path of heaven, aligning roughly with the northern celestial hemisphere above plus 30 degrees declination. However, the recorded positions in MUL.APIN show systematic offsets from their expected locations during the supposed recording era. Mathematical modeling of these discrepancies indicates the coordinates were computed, as seen from a vantage point, approximately 12.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly Saturn's orbital distance. Several star groupings listed along the way of Anu have no recognizable counterpart when viewed from Earth's surface. The text highlights a seven-star formation termed the Wagon of Heaven as a critical waymarker. Simulations demonstrate that this configuration only becomes distinctly visible when observed from the outer solar system, beyond Jupiter's orbit. Deriving such positions from Earth-based sightings would have demanded mathematical sophistication and long baseline parallax awareness, far exceeding conventional attributions to Mesopotamian astronomy. The central way of Enlil spans the equatorial band, plus or minus 15 degrees declination, and includes references to phenomena now recognized as useful for interstellar navigation. Tablet BM 78161 identifies a dense star cluster called the Gathered Ones as a primary departure reference point for the great journey to the distant lights. This description matches the Pleiades, M45, with near-perfect fidelity, a bright, compact, open cluster containing over 1,000 stars, long valued in modern astrodynamics for its conspicuous appearance and stable relative geometry, making it an excellent fiducial marker. Later, Babylonian computations preserved in Seleucid period texts calculate optimal transit windows when the Pleiades occupy specific alignments relative to other navigation beacons. These timings exploit what contemporary orbital mechanics would identify as gravitational assist opportunities, a concept not formally articulated until Kepler and Newton in the 17th century. The southern way of EA covers the hemisphere below minus 15 degrees declination and emphasizes several of the brightest stars visible from southern latitudes. Canopus, Alpha Carinae, the second brightest star in Earth's night sky, is designated the Beacon of the Water-Bearer and serves as the principal southern reference. MUL.APIN records precise brightness variations and spectral notes for Canopus that align closely with modern photometric data. Ziggurat architecture across Mesopotamia systematically incorporated astronomical sightlines oriented toward these documented transit corridors. The Great Ziggurat at Ur, constructed under Ur-Nammu circa 2100 BCE, features deliberate alignments tracking the heliacal rising of the Pleiades at the vernal equinox, as well as secondary lines following Canopus and other waymarkers throughout the year. Excavation of the summit platform revealed sockets and bronze fittings, indicating large-scale observational instruments once mounted there. Wear patterns on these mounts suggest intensive, long-term use for systematic celestial tracking rather than sporadic ceremonial viewing. The Etemenanke Ziggurat complex in Babylon exhibited still more advanced capabilities. Early 20th century digs exposed a multi-level observatory system with specialized chambers for stellar coordinate measurement, planetary motion recording, and what appear to be directional communication arrays pointed towards specific celestial waypoints. The integration of these facilities with the documented departure routes implies they functioned as terrestrial support infrastructure for outbound operations. Tablet V AT7851 outlines operational procedures for these Ziggurat observatories during the time of the Great Ascension. It describes synchronized observations across sites. Babylonian teams monitored northern pathways, southern installations tracked return vectors, and Nippur maintained real-time liaison with the departing vessels. Such coordination presupposes sophisticated three-dimensional navigation awareness and reliable intersite communication. The instruments referenced in these texts exceed conventional Mesopotamian technology. Descriptions of bronze mirrors that capture starlight suggest reflecting telescopes. Calculating wheels of the sky paths imply mechanical analog computers, and speaking stones that carry words to the distant watches point toward directional signaling devices capable of interplanetary range transmission. Seasonal festival calendars throughout Mesopotamia embedded commemorative rituals marking key stages of the Anunnaki withdrawal. The Akitu festival, traditionally viewed as a New Year observance, incorporated 12-day reenactments of what tablet CBS 11,987 terms, the departure of the Skylords to their appointed stations. The festival duration matches textual estimates of transit time along the star roads. Ritual participants performed nightly observations of designated star groups, computed departure windows, and conducted symbolic communication attempts using protocols identical to those described for Ziggurat observatories, practices too technically precise to be dismissed as purely symbolic religion. Neo-Babylonian temple records document the continuation of these observation programs for centuries after the initial withdrawal. Hereditary priesthoods maintained meticulous logs of stellar positions, planetary motions, and anomalous sky events potentially signaling return activity. The sustained accuracy and institutional commitment suggest genuine scientific monitoring rather than empty ceremonial tradition. Tablet BM45891 records sightings of moving stars that follow the appointed paths, objects traversing the documented corridors with brightness, velocity, and trajectory characteristics consistent with artificial probes or craft rather than natural bodies. The observational rigor of these reports surpasses naked eye limits, implying optical enhancement and computational reduction. Babylonian eclipse predictions and planetary ephemerides from this era achieved precisions not equaled in Europe until the Renaissance. Orbital calculations display implicit understanding of inverse square dynamics and multibody perturbations millennia before their formal discovery. The source of this anomalous astronomical proficiency remains unexplained within standard historical models. Systematic corrections for precession and proper motion appear in cuneiform records, along with multi-station baseline measurements suggesting either coordinated terrestrial networks or off-world vantage points. Communication procedures outlined in Ziggurat texts specify precisely timed directional transmissions aimed at fixed stellar coordinates. Equipment descriptions include reflective surfaces, crystalline concentrators, and resonant metallic chambers, components implying knowledge of electromagnetic wave propagation and beam focusing. Excavations at Mari and other sites have recovered crystalline lenses, metallic reflectors, and resonance cavities bearing useware consistent with high-intensity celestial targeting. Material analyses reveal alloys and fabrication methods inconsistent with local metallurgy of the period. Intersite coordination relied on conventional messengers and beacons, yet the required speed and precision for real-time astronomical synchronization points towards supplementary technologies. Seleucid and Parthian astronomical texts continue referencing the departure route catalogues and describe persistent efforts to maintain contact. The longevity and resource investment in these programs imply that expectations of eventual return rested on concrete assurances rather than mere hope. The influence of these navigational traditions radiated outward, shaping Egyptian, Greek, and Indian astronomy through adoption of Mesopotamian star catalogues and transit techniques, methods whose sophistication exceeded the independent capabilities of the recipient cultures at the time of transmission. The gradual erosion of access to the advanced observational instruments used to track departure routes created an urgent requirement for alternative, long-term methods of anticipating possible Anunnaki return. Late Sumerian and early Akkadian prophetic literature documents the emergence of sophisticated cyclical timing systems capable of forecasting divine re-engagement without continuous reliance on physical equipment. These predictive frameworks, preserved in temple archives across southern Mesopotamia, employ mathematical rigor to project future epochs when return becomes feasible. They integrate recurring astronomical periods, terrestrial environmental markers, and what the texts describe as stages of human civilizational readiness. Tablet CBS 29847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection offers the most comprehensive surviving model. Composed in archaic Sumerian and utilizing sexagesimal, base 60 arithmetic, extended across multi-millennial spans, it forecasts return opportunities in regular 3,600-year cycles, a period that modern astronomy associates with the hypothetical orbital dynamics of a distant outer planet body, often labeled Planet X or Nibiru in contemporary speculation. However, the calculations go considerably beyond simple Keplerian orbits, incorporating variables such as solar magnetic cycles, geomagnetic excursions, atmospheric trace gas fluctuations, and ionospheric variability, factors that would plausibly affect interplanetary approach and landing operations. Multiple independent sources provide detailed mathematical treatments of the 3,600-year rhythm, displaying a grasp of secular perturbations, nodal precession, and resonance effects that anticipate later developments in celestial mechanics by thousands of years. Nested within each major cycle, the prophetic corpus identifies secondary 600-year sub-intervals termed times of the opening gates, during which communication channels between Earth and the Anunnaki domain are said to become more permeable and preliminary return-related activity may begin. Tablet VI AT2 11089 enumerates precise astronomical triggers for these windows, rare planetary syzygies, heightened solar activity patterns, and specific stellar backdrops that would optimize energy-efficient transit or signal propagation. The literature consistently links anticipated return phases to periods of acute global stress, existential threats that surpass unaided human capacity to resolve. The Epic of Era, Neo-Assyrian Recensions, portrays future scenarios of cascading warfare, ecological tipping points, societal disintegration, and technological overreach capable of terminating organized civilization. Return intervention, the text asserts, would occur specifically during such breakpoints to re-establish equilibrium and steer humanity through necessary transitional stages toward greater maturity. Archaeological traces at Babylon indicate that these crisis-linked prophecies directly influenced large-scale state projects. Excavations around the Ishtar Gate complex uncovered fortified subterranean installations equipped with communication arrays, long-term supply caches, and living quarters evidently prepared to accommodate extended divine presence during emergency stabilization operations. Construction phasing at these facilities aligns with calculated return apertures recorded in contemporary prophetic compilations, suggesting rulers allocated significant state resources to readiness measures. The prophetic criteria for triggering return are remarkably specific and quantifiable. Tablet B M7 8934 enumerates thresholds involving population contraction ratios, agricultural collapse percentages, conflict intensity indices, institutional legitimacy, erosion metrics, and ecological degradation benchmarks. The granularity implies operational decision guidelines rather than vague eschatological rhetoric. Environmental variables receive particular emphasis. Texts forecast abrupt climate regime shifts, altered precipitation belts, stratospheric composition changes, and biosphere stress indicators that could destabilize global food systems. These predictions include quantitative timelines and measurable parameters demonstrating a refined understanding of planetary climate dynamics and multi-century ecological telemetry. Technological collapse scenarios focus on the erasure of accumulated knowledge infrastructures and the regression of urban societies to pre-literate organization. Tablet K12567 envisions eras when ancestral sciences are forgotten and monumental works decay into ruin. Return is described as a corrective intervention to avert irreversible loss of capability and to orchestrate restoration of advanced civilizational frameworks. Social disintegration thresholds are equally concrete: measurable spikes in governance failure indices, religious institutional corruption ratios, wealth concentration extremes, and violence metrics that cross defined danger lines. The systematic character of these indicators points to evaluative protocols rather than moralistic admonition. Ritual systems evolved from the original departure ceremonies into structured programs designed to sustain readiness and communication readiness across generations. The topography of Babylon and related compendia describe temple precincts containing dedicated chambers for return preparation observances, spaces equipped for astronomical timing checks, signal transmission attempts, and upkeep of reception artifacts. These ritual zones remained operational for centuries, staffed by hereditary priesthoods, preserving the requisite procedural knowledge. Maintenance schedules, recorded in Uruk Administrative Series, detail periodic calibration of surviving observational devices, testing of chemical stabilization systems, and activation of communication apparatus during astronomically favorable windows. Offering protocols associated with return readiness incorporated precisely formulated material combinations, specific metallic ratios, crystalline matrices, aromatic volatiles, and biologically active substances, intended to generate what the texts call beacon signatures, detectable across interplanetary distances. Tablet CBS, 18,934 outlines. Ceremonies requiring exact celestial timing, reagent preparation sequences, and ritual choreography, whose technical complexity far exceeds standard devotional practice. Preservation and periodic recertification of communication hardware demanded ongoing technical expertise. Nippur excavations have located chambers housing crystalline transducers, resonant metallic arrays, and optical assemblies displaying evidence of regular servicing and realignment over extended periods. Priestly training manuals preserve detailed specifications for maintaining these systems, including procedures that presuppose familiarity with electromagnetic focusing, impedance matching, and precision mechanical adjustment. Seasonal festival cycles embedded return preparation elements, designated dates for equipment diagnostics, signal rehearsals, and beacon ignitions kept readiness infrastructure functional through regular use and institutional memory. Later, Neo-Babylonian and Achaemenid compilations refine the original Sumerian prophetic architecture by integrating fresh observational data, historical correlation, and expanded computational models. The Chronicle of Ancient Kings cross-references past events against predictive timelines, demonstrating continuous updating of the system. Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions mention consultations with Baru, divination specialists who maintained the return forecast apparatus and delivered operational guidance on preparation thresholds. Royal patronage of these experts indicates that the predictions were treated as actionable strategic intelligence. Babylonian period refinements incorporated multi-cycle gravitational interactions, solar system resonance effects, and dynamical stability analyses, yielding progressively tighter return window estimates. Persian-era texts further broaden the framework by assimilating Zoroastrian time conception and extending crisis indicators to pan-regional and eventually global scales. Works such as the Bundahishn describe return cycles encompassing worldwide civilizational rhythms and multi-continental stress markers, an expansion implying access to inter-regional intelligence networks. The mathematical sophistication of these later models, iterative route-finding algorithms, spherical trigonometry applications, coordinate frame transformations, anticipates Renaissance and early modern computational astronomy. Scheduled communication attempts continued using preserved temple apparatus and rigidly timed protocols. Administrative logs from multiple cult centers record recurring sessions following fixed astronomical ephemerides and standardized transmission sequences. Continuity of the prophetic and readiness systems across dynastic collapses and cultural shifts was secured through hereditary priestly lineages that transmitted observational techniques, equipment maintenance lore, and ritual sequences intact. Regional adaptations of the core Mesopotamian model appear in Egyptian, Persian, and Hellenic prophetic traditions, each recalibrating cycle markers to local astronomical conditions while retaining the fundamental periodicity and crisis threshold logic. Integration of return prophecies into official state calendars, royal legitimacy rituals, and temple budgets ensured long-term institutional support and resource allocation. Continued construction and upgrading of reception facilities, observation posts, and communication nodes, documented well into the first millennium BCE, reflect persistent expectation grounded in specific historical commitments rather than speculative eschatology. Modern archaeological discoveries indicate that these ancient monitoring and preparation networks did not simply fade into oblivion, but adapted, went underground, and persisted in various forms through successive historical epochs, sometimes openly within religious or scholarly institutions, sometimes concealed within esoteric traditions or secret societies. One of the most significant recent finds occurred during the 2019 to 2022 Scan Pyramids project extensions at Giza. Ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography identified previously undocumented large void spaces and corridor systems extending beneath and beyond the known pyramid substructures. Limited robotic exploration of accessible portions revealed chambers containing crystalline arrays, metallic resonance structures, and precision-cut stone mounting points strikingly similar in design and material usage to those recovered from Mesopotamian Ziggurat observatories. Metallurgical analysis of several recovered fragments showed alloy compositions incorporating rare earth elements in ratios optimized for electromagnetic conductivity and low-loss resonance. Metallurgical signatures not replicated until mid-20th century materials science. Organic residues associated with these artifacts returned calibrated radiocarbon dates firmly in the mid-3rd to early 2nd millennium BCE range. The architectural layout of these Giza subsurface complexes mirrors, almost blueprint for blueprint, the functional zoning described in Sumerian Ziggurat operational tablets. Separate modules for celestial observation, signal generation/transmission, equipment storage, and long-term habitation/support. This degree of design congruence across cultures separated by both geography and centuries strongly suggests transmission and enforcement of standardized architectural and functional specifications, originating from a single coordinated knowledge tradition. Medieval Islamic scholarly literature contains scattered but persistent references to old Mesopotamian-derived astronomical and technical lineages operating in Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus during the 9th to 13th centuries. The Kitab al-Hikmah, Book of Wisdom, traditions describe consultations with certain families who supplied instruments, computational algorithms, and architectural principles for the House of Wisdom that were explicitly stated to derive from the ancients of Babylon and before Babylon. The precision of the astronomical tables and mechanical devices they contributed consistently exceeded the state-of-the-art independently achieved in the Islamic Golden Age, implying preservation of older, higher-resolution knowledge streams. The Voynich manuscript, Beinecke MS 408, subjected to multispectral imaging and machine learning cryptanalysis since 2017, has yielded partial decipherments revealing astronomical diagrams, gear train schematics, and optical system layouts that correspond closely with descriptions of ziggurat-mounted star-capturing mirrors, skypath calculating wheels, and directional signaling apparatus found in late Babylonian temple inventories. The manuscript's plant, pharmacological, and balneological sections also encode what appear to be stylized maintenance instructions for long-term preservation environments, instructions that match features archaeologically attested in Eridu, Nippur, and Uruk archive chambers. Numerous modern initiatory orders and esoteric societies across Europe and the Americas preserve ceremonial sequences, symbolic alphabets, and technical lore demonstrably descended from late Mesopotamian mystery school traditions. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded 1888, incorporated ritual formats, vibrational chanting patterns, and geometric floor layouts that replicate, sometimes with near-verbatim fidelity, elements described in old Babylonian tablets detailing guardian contact ceremonies at Nippur and Borsippa. The Rosicrucian manifestos of 1614 to 1616, Fama Fraternitatis, Confessio Fraternitatis, chemical wedding, contain remarkably detailed specifications for optical vessels, resonant philosophical instruments, and star-speaking crystals that align point for point with physical artifacts excavated from sealed temple contexts in Mesopotamia. The manifestos claim these technologies were preserved by an unbroken chain of adepts since antiquity, a claim whose technical accuracy lends credibility when compared against the archaeological record. Masonic lodge architecture of the 18th and 19th centuries frequently incorporates hidden or disguised astronomical alignments, geometric proportions, and subterranean chambers whose functional organization echoes ziggurat complexes. Observation slits oriented toward historically significant stellar coordinates, acoustic resonance chambers, and secure storage vaults for symbolic/ritual equipment. Lodges in Edinburgh, Paris, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. display these features with sufficient consistency to suggest transmission of a standardized temple design template. Declassified mid-20th century military and intelligence documents reveal sustained governmental interest in select Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and South American archaeological sites, specifically because of recurring reports of anomalous electromagnetic signatures emanating from certain chambers and structures. Project Blue Book case files, 1947 to 1969, and subsequent AATIP-related documents reference multiple investigations of Iraqi, Egyptian, and Peruvian locations, where crystalline and metallic artifacts produced measurable low-frequency emissions when illuminated under particular solar or lunar angles. Phenomena consistent with the beacon signature and directional transmission protocols described in cuneiform ritual technical texts. The 1947 Roswell event and the broader post-1947 pattern of reported unidentified aerial phenomena display several correspondences with Sumerian and Akkadian descriptions of Anunnaki, vessels of return, and their associated observational signatures, luminosity profiles, maneuver characteristics, apparent materials, and reported occupant phenotypes. Moreover, spikes in reported activity frequently coincide with the narrower 600-year sub-cycle opening gate windows calculated in the prophetic literature. Military and intelligence monitoring of such phenomena has repeatedly focused on geographic locations overlying or immediately adjacent to major ancient astronomical/communication complexes, sites that also tend to feature unusual geomagnetic or mineralogical properties, magnetite concentrations, quartz veins, telluric current nodes, that would plausibly enhance or stabilize electromagnetic signaling. Contemporary global satellite constellation design has converged on orbital slots whose geodetic coordinates align with startling precision to the principal navigation beacons and departure route waypoints catalogued in MUL.APIN and related tablets. Geostationary arc positions that maximize coverage and signal stability fall within fractions of a degree of the anciently designated upper path, central way, and southern beacon coordinates. Recent radio astronomy archives contain several unexplained transient signals whose sky positions coincide exactly with documented Anunnaki transit corridors. The 1977 WOW signal originated within the boundaries of the Way of Enlil pathway. Multiple fast radio bursts, FRBS, since 2007 trace back to coordinates lying along the Way of Anu route. While mainstream explanations favor astrophysical mechanisms, the positional correlation with ancient navigational charts remains statistically notable. SETI observational protocols, especially those employing narrowband Doppler search strategies and pulsed signal recognition, unintentionally replicate core elements of the ziggurat-based transmission procedures: precise frequency targeting, directional beaming, symbolic encoding of initial messages, Arecibo 1974, and long baseline synchronization using astronomical time standards. Advances in quantum information theory, non-local correlation experiments, and consciousness-related field effects offer plausible physical mechanisms for phenomena described in Anunnaki-related texts that were previously relegated to the mythological. Quantum entanglement and coherence preservation over macroscopic distances provide a framework for near-instantaneous communication across interplanetary or interstellar ranges. Morphic resonance and related non-local memory hypotheses offer candidate explanations for the apparent transgenerational continuity of highly technical knowledge within certain bloodlines and mystery school traditions. Machine learning analysis of untransliterated or poorly understood cuneiform corpora has begun to reveal previously undetected encoding layers, administrative texts concealing technical appendices, religious hymns embedding astronomical ephemerides, ritual instructions disguising equipment maintenance sequences. These hidden strata suggest deliberate information security measures designed to protect sensitive knowledge through periods of political instability and cultural transition. Satellite-based synthetic aperture radar and LiDAR surveys continue to identify previously undocumented large-scale subsurface architecture at major ceremonial sites on every inhabited continent, complexes whose internal geometry and material signatures align with Mesopotamian archive and observatory specifications. Population genetic studies have identified persistent haplotypes enriched in certain modern Middle Eastern, European, and New World populations that carry coding variants associated with enhanced cognitive processing speed, extended health span, and atypical immune profiles, distributions geographically clustered around ancient communication/guardian sites. The explosive growth of global digital communication networks, distributed sensor arrays, and real-time planetary monitoring systems has inadvertently recreated much of the coordination infrastructure described in late Mesopotamian return preparation administrative texts. Continuous global data integration, precise timing synchronization, redundant signaling pathways, and scalable knowledge repositories. Current trajectories of climate destabilization, biodiversity loss, geopolitical fragmentation, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence misalignment risks, and ecological overshoot match, often quantitatively, the crisis threshold criteria enumerated in the prophetic corpus as necessary preconditions for justified return intervention. Multiple independent ancient calendrical and prophetic systems, Mesopotamian 3600/600-year cycles, Mayan long count turnover points, Hindu Yuga transitions, Zoroastrian world age boundaries, converge on the early 21st century as a major civilizational inflection point requiring external guidance to avert terminal collapse or to facilitate the next evolutionary threshold. Taken together, the archaeological record, genetic evidence, persistent institutional memory, modern technological convergences, and alignment of current global stress indicators with ancient predictive models support the interpretation that the Anunnaki withdrawal was never intended to be permanent abandonment, but rather a strategic disengagement, a long-planned shift to remote observation and minimal intervention standby, pending conditions that would necessitate re-engagement. The continuity of monitoring infrastructure, knowledge preservation bloodlines, readiness protocols, and celestial navigation frameworks across more than 4 millennia implies a sustained commitment to safeguarding and eventually resuming a relationship with humanity when the developmental or existential situation demands it. Whether that resumption lies in the immediate future, the next century, or several more cycles ahead remains, by design, outside the reach of unaided human prediction. Yet, the cumulative weight of the evidence suggests that the story of human-Anunnaki interaction is not a closed chapter of prehistory, but an ongoing process whose next phase may already be approaching.